This story discusses sexual assault and harassment, as well as drug and alcohol use. If you need to talk to someone about anything raised in this story, you can always reach out by calling 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or texting 0458 737 732, and we'll put those numbers in today's show notes. Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Sam.
I'm Lucy. Sam, before we jump into your chat with Eryk Bagshaw and Bianca Hrovat from the Sydney Morning Herald, can you walk me through some of the key facts? So tell me about Swillhouse.
Yeah, sure. So Swillhouse is a company of over 300 staff formed in 2008, and it runs a number of restaurants and bars in Sydney like the Baxter's Inn, Restaurant Hubert, Caterpillar Club, Shady Pines and Le Foot. They're kind of up there in the Sydney hospitality scene with a group like the Maher Group as one of the largest players in the market.
So then last week, the Herald starts publishing these very serious allegations in an investigation that now spans 11 stories. These allegations were made by former employees of Swillhouse Group. Tell me about the sort of things they were alleging.
Yeah, so as you said, there's been 11 stories now, so there's quite a lot in there. But if you were to kind of categorize it into broad areas, the findings are really about alleged misogyny, sexual harassment, cover-ups and drug abuse across a number of those Swillhouse venues. And perhaps centrally, the SMH investigation reported that male bartenders ranked female customers' attractiveness and encouraged staff to have sex with patrons. One former Hubert staffer said she was raped in the restaurant toilets by a colleague. After reporting the incident, the woman claims senior management reduced her working hours. The SMH investigations also detailed allegations of a widespread culture of excessive drinking and drug abuse across almost all of the Swillhouse venues.
And all of those allegations, now that they're in the public domain, have led to the CEO of Swillhouse, Anton Fort, stepping down, although it's worth noting that he's not personally accused of any misconduct. Other than that resignation, what have we heard from the group itself?
Well, we kind of have this one social media post from the Swillhouse Group across most of their social media accounts, and it basically says that the allegations pertain to, quote, how Swillhouse used to operate in the past. The statement continued and said, quote, we sincerely apologise to anyone who has felt hurt, unsafe, unprotected, triggered or unheard.
And now there's a SafeWork New South Wales investigation, and that's where we pick up with your conversation with Eryk and Bianca.
Exactly, and I don't think that's the end of the story by any means, so it's an interesting time to talk to Bianca and Eryk. Here's that chat. Bianca and Eryk, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Bianca, I'd love to start with you. For somebody who's not from Sydney, and potentially then if we broaden that to people who don't work in hospitality, why should they be tapping into this story?
I think it's important because so many people eat out. It's a very popular activity, and we need to know that, where we're going is worth supporting, and they are looking after their staff, and everyone within those buildings feels safe and supported. I think so many of us do have jobs in hospitality as we grow up or know people in hospitality. I think it's a very legitimate career, and people should have the opportunity to see it as such and pursue it without any fear of sexual harassment or assault.
Eryk, when this story first kind of came into your orbit, as much as you can tell me, because I know, of course, journalists, we have to protect our sources, but what were the kind of initial stages of this coming into your life, this story?
Well, we had always had discussions, I think, around whether it's friends in hospitality or contacts who, it's long been at least rumoured about sexual harassment, drugs, poor treatment in restaurants and bars. In many ways, that is not surprising. But why this is a big story is the way the company responded to those claims. And this is not a small company. This company has 6-7 venues, millions of dollars in revenue, 300 plus staff. It is a big player. And I think that's the other key thing looking at it here is that it's not like we're just looking at a series of bars and restaurants. We're actually looking at a very large business. And as we've seen in other stories in other industries, they need to take sexual harassment and assault claims seriously. And when they don't, it can often blow up in their face. So one part of that is you've got rumours and suggestions of improper behaviour. The next part is actually stacking that up. And I think what happened initially, there was an anonymous Instagram account that started to pop up back in May or so. And, that made some claims that, again, were unpublishable as far as we were concerned. But we needed to devote some resources to investigating them. And that's what we did. And we started talking mostly to the first place you look is former staff. Why have people left? Why over these periods are these people exiting the business? And you start talking to them and they start connecting you with other people. And eventually you establish a pattern of behaviour that has occurred within these businesses. And in the course of that, one group kept on coming up time and time again, and that was Swillhouse. So that's the process that we started at until we got to this week to be able to publish based on not just multiple claims, but some on the record claims now about their experiences within that company.
So do you mean there that the kind of turning point in you both seeing this piece as just another piece to this is actually a substantive, meaty, story that might change an industry, was that the element of the company knowing about it throughout the years and not taking action? Do you think that was the secret ingredient per se?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's that, definitely. But I think it's also, it's so unusual to find women who can speak up about it or feel supported enough to speak up about it. And that means that it's so rare to be able to put together a story and verify it to publishable quality. And we're so lucky that those women did feel confident enough to speak to us about that.
Spell that out a bit for people listening at home. So why couldn't you go public with allegations where the women who are making those allegations wanted to remain completely anonymous?
Well, we did, certainly in our first report way back on Wednesday, which feels like an eternity ago, we established 5 sexual assault complainants. Now, it's one thing to make an allegation of sexual assault, but you actually need documentary evidence to be able to publish, certainly for the Herald, and that includes police reports. So once we established the allegations have not just been made internally within the company and escalated up the chain, but that police had been brought in, then we're dealing with something that is pretty substantially and on legally safe ground. So that process, you can't just publish anonymous allegations in a newspaper. You actually have to be able to verify them. And then once we went to the company with the details of those allegations and they confirmed every single incident had occurred, we were in a very strong position to be able to press publish on this story. And subsequent to that, because of how the company has responded and the claims that it has now cleaned up its act, we have seen other staff and some of the original complainants now prepared to go on the record and come out publicly and identify themselves. Jenna Hemsworth, the 2018 Bartender of the Year, Rocky Hare, one of Sydney's best-known bartenders, 2 women at the very top of this company who said they were sexually assaulted while working there and the company failed to respond in the proper way. There are many more stories than that. And so at that point, you are starting to see, again, a pattern of behaviour that makes a story more substantial than just one-off incidents.
And so here we are. We know that SafeWork New South Wales is looking into it. And I wanted to ask you guys about that occurring now as a result of your investigation. What exactly in your eyes can SafeWork New South Wales do? I mean, one of the questions that we've gotten from our readers and listeners is, what is SafeWork? I mean, who is this body and what can they actually do to stop what sounds like, based on your reporting, a deeply endemic cultural issue? What are your thoughts on that?
So SafeWork is the government body responsible for making sure that employees are safe wherever they're working. In this instance, SafeWork also has a responsibility for maintaining and overseeing whether drugs are being used in workplaces, whether there's sexual assault and harassment going in. I think one of the problems with police handling of sexual assault and harassment claims historically has been that some people have been reluctant to come forward, or sometimes they feel as though their allegations may not be taken seriously. That's probably changed a bit in recent times, but that stigma is still there. So SafeWork is another avenue that people can go down to try and make a difference and report their claims to ensure that other employees don't go through the same thing without necessarily going through the process of a formal police investigation and potentially criminal charges. So it just gives people another avenue to go down. They have the ability to pursue large fines. Whether they will do that in this case, I don't know. But certainly that is one of the powers that they have to pursue those matters through the courts.
Bianca, I've seen a few tweets over the last couple of days with some rumours, allegations, if you want to put it like that, that other hospitality groups are reaching out to staff, instructing them not to talk to media. Does that give you a sense that this is the tip of the hospitality iceberg when it comes to this kind of behaviour?
My gosh, so much. We've gotten just an endless stream of people contacting us, a lot more willing to go on record now. Just women who felt like they could never speak up before and now feel like there's all this support where at least they didn't perceive it to exist before. And that's really powerful. But it does show how pervasive an issue it is in hospitality. It seems to be affecting a lot of big hospitality groups. And that's definitely something that we want to look into further.
So you're going to keep reporting on these hospitality groups, not just Swillhouse?
Yes.
Yeah, it's staggering that the level of disclosures we've received. And I would say to any hospitality groups that the only thing you could do to guarantee that you will be in the news is to say, don't talk to the media. Tilly Devine, a group that also runs some bars and restaurants in Sydney, did exactly that just last week. And of course, we put them in the story saying they were trying to silence their staff. It's a classic case of if you're actually open to transparency and you actually want better outcomes for your staff, then you have to be open to scrutiny. And I think some large hospitality organisations are only just starting to learn that.
One more point to add then, I guess, is that whilst you guys would have been doing this investigation and reporting, there were other harassment claims at 9, which is your workplace. I mean, it appears to me that media is not immune from this clearly as well. I mean, there's been a 7 investigation done by ABC's Four Corners. Was that difficult to be at 9 whilst these allegations and claims and dismissals ultimately were coming up, and also you were working on a story that was almost parallel in another sector?
I'm a little bit separate from all of that. It was difficult because there was a lot of, organizational changes and things like that happening at the same time. But the Good Food team is predominantly female. So it's not something we've personally run into. But it is such a massive issue, it seems, especially in broadcast. Watching that Four Corners report was really harrowing.
Yeah, and I'd say that, to its credit, the Herald and its leadership, we were running daily front page stories on the internal sexual harassment allegations and treatment of women within 9, our parent company. And I think that's a really good principle to maintain because, there's no better transparency, than sunlight, than to be open to exploring these issues. And I think our paper actually has a very proud record of doing that.
Eryk and Bianca, I just want to thank you for your reporting and for your time. We'll throw a link to some of the stories. I can see the Herald's actually made a nice kind of timeline of tracking when this first story was broken and then the kind of 5 or 6 stories and a note from your editor that have happened since. We'll throw that in today's bio. But thanks so much for joining us on the Daily Aus.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you for joining us on the Daily Aus today. If you need to talk to someone about anything raised in this story, you can always reach out to 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732, or you can text 0458 737 732. We'll be back again with another episode tomorrow.